Hello, Hydro Climate 2K. So this is a short tutorial just to step through one of the parts of the workflow, which is after we have just had a database update. If you had had a new lipid waiting in folder 4 to be added to the lipidverse and added to the database, it now will have been if a database update is just happened. So we're going to step through the next part of the process, which essentially is copying in the metadata you will have accumulated, probably in your archives working QC sheet, copying that over to the master QC sheet. So officially adding your nicely distilled interpretation metadata to the master QC sheet. All right, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so here we are in the project Google Drive. Remember, as always, this is a very handy document if you are working on metadata. Then this is the dictionary as a reminder for what should go where. But so imagine maybe you've come to this video because you've just got the email that there's been a database update. What that means is that our database manager, Nick McKay, will have got all of the lipids that had accumulated in this folder 4 here, which come from all archive teams, and added them into the lipidverse. So they live on the lipidverse, and also added them into our compilation. And then exported a brand new QC sheet, master QC sheet, that will retain any changes, sort of metadata changes that were made in that sheet in the previous version, but now will also have new rows for all the new data sets. So there'll be one row for every variable for every data set that was added. And then the folder with your lipid in it will have been moved to this folder 5, added to lipidverse. Okay, so I'm going to open up the master QC sheet. So here we are in the folder QC sheets, and here we go, here it is. So here we're at version 0.4.0. The previous one would have been 0.3.0. I'm going to enter the metadata for a tree ring record that's just been added. Now remember, so I'm sort of following the general process. You might not be doing this exactly, but the general workflow is that, some time ago you will have found a record, you will have got the data, made it into lipid format, put it into this folder for checked that passes our criteria for inclusion, and then you will have hopefully already been sort of reading through the paper and distilling out that all-important interpretation metadata. So the climate interpretation, the environment interpretation, and making a note of that in your archive's working QC sheet. So remember that the master QC sheet is the tool that we use to officially add metadata into the database, so once you put something in the master QC sheet, that's it. At the next update, it will be officially tacked onto the lipids, whereas your archives working QC sheets are where you can sort of safely play around without any danger of mucking things up. Okay, so here I am in the master QC sheet. Now, I've written a Substack about this, I think, and maybe even made one of these video tutorials about it. But so my preference when I'm entering metadata to the master QC sheet is to only be looking at the rows that I am working out without having to, sort of scroll through everything. And so we can filter for that. But remember, this sheet is shared by the entire project, or however 100 of us or whatever. And so if I were to, and I'm going to do it, if I were to filter to only look at coral records like this, if somebody else now came into the master QC sheet, they would see this, they would only see coral records, and that would maybe be quite confusing. So we don't do that. Instead, you go to data and create filter view. And see here, this extra green bar has appeared at the top. And now that means that I can do any filtering I like, and it will not affect how anybody else sees the sheet. This is a sort of a personal view. Okay, so I'm going to find a new data set. So I'll go to dataset name here and filter according to record, which is Gina Downs Gully. Okay, and you can see it's a very long way down because it's only just been added to the database. In this particular data set, there's only one row, which means like there was only one variable in the lipid. If you'd have had more variables, say you put in a coral that had carbonate delta 18, seawater delta 18, and strontium calcium, then there would be 3 rows. But here I just have one. So this is a tree ring width record. And you can see some information has come along from the lipid. So we already have the data set name, the archive type. Remember, when you're making a lipid, you have to enter the latitude and longitude. So they're there, the site name. We have the variable name, which is ring width. And then there we go, lots of empty space ready for me to enter metadata. So ideally, you will have already prepared your metadata. It'll be ready to go and sitting in your archives working QC sheet. So this is the this is the workflow overview for the tree team. Let's see, where are we? Gina Downs Scully. So we've just been added to Lipidverse. This is, I think most archive teams have something like this, which lists the data sets that someone's currently working on, and what stage of the process they're at. Any notes? You can see here for this record, I've put across in all metadata added to working QC sheet, but I still need to add that metadata to the master QC sheet. The tree team keeps the working QC sheet in the same doc. So here it is. Here's that record, actually. I might do the same thing. Do a filter. Okay, so here it is, Gina Downs Gully. And you can see that I've put more information here than, of course, is in the master QC sheet yet. So, some people might, if your archive group's working QC sheet has exactly the same columns as the master QC sheet, you could bravely go ahead and just copy this, Control C, copy this entire row and paste it straight in. I'm rarely brave enough to do that. I tend to go cell by cell and enter individually. So we'll start with, we've got some publication information here. So the DOI, a longer full text citation. I've just Control C it. I'm going to copy those in. So there we go. What else have we got here? I've got the original data URL. So this came off NOAA from the International Tree Ring Database. So got original data URL, the latitude and longitude are already there. So it's the site name. Okay, and now I'm across into the environment interpretation. So remember, probably maybe some of you are still getting your heads around this. Just a reminder that the environment interpretation should be the sort of physical process with or the quantity with the least degree possible of interpretation. There's maybe some discussion to be had around this in some cases, but this particular record, it's a tree ring width record, and so what that represents is the tree's growth rate. So there we go. We've got environment interpretation 1. I'm going to scroll over here and just check that that's the right call. Yeah, so we've got environment interpretation 1. There it is, tree growth rate. Now the direction, so if the tree is growing faster, then the ring will be wider, which means that's a positive direction. So environment interpretation, what direction? Just check that it's the right field. There we go. And then we've got seasonality. Remember that seasonality should always be entered in this format. So the first 3 letters of the month with a dash in between if it's multiple months. There's a link to the dictionary for this in the definitions document. And yeah, I'm going to copy that in. So I've got seasonality. Okay, that seems to be all I have. I mean, maybe I put in a bit more later, but for now this will do. Scroll across. I don't have a secondary environment interpretation, but if you did, you could put that in. And then here we've got climate interpretation is precipitation. So I'll copy that over. Double check that I'm putting it into the right field. There we go. Same for seasonality and direction. And then here, this interpretation applies field, depending on when you're watching this video, you may or may not know what this means, or if your archive leaders have passed it on. This is, at the time of recording this, a relatively new field, and this buffers against the case, like this is quite common in lake records, but probably quite a lot, where some portion of the record has been affected by processes not related to hydroclimate. So the classic example might be a lake sediment core where the top part of the core has been affected by like landscape changes or some other human activities that are not related to hydroclimate. But beyond that, it is a hydroclimate proxy. In that case, this interpretation, precipitation only applies to part of the record. And you can add that now as a metadata field. So in this paper, the authors said that it's actually an earlier part of the record, for whatever reason, doesn't so reliably reflect precipitation, that this should only be interpreted as precipitation from 1802 to 2012. So we can put that information into interpretation applies. Good. What else do we have here? Oh, and they committed to a dynamical driver, which certainly not all papers do, and this is very much not a required field, but it's there if you want it. So let's see, we've got a southern annular mode. I've got a long description of the basis, which I just copied out of the paper, and a direction. Okay. That straight over, check that these are correct. So dynamical system, basis, and direction. Okay, and so that is essentially all the interpretation metadata in. Do not forget the all-important, I call these the orange fields, and these are kind of like the database management fields essentially, which is primary time series in this compilation and hydroclimate 2K certification. Remember that a variable isn't sort of officially considered part of the database unless it has true in this compilation. So you'll copy that from, where you've put it in your working QC sheet. I'm going to make another video on this because I think it's been confusing a few people lately. When you download when anyone, a user downloads the database, they will get the full lipid, like they will get all of the full lipid files, which means they'll get all variables in all data sets, including variables that are flagged false for in this compilation. It'll just be that a first step of people using the database will be to take that huge collection of lipids and filter it to only retain variables that have a true for in this compilation, but all the data will be available. Anyway, so we've got that, and then primary time series will also be true because there's only one. And finally, the hydroclimate 2K certification field. I mean, we added this more to keep a track of whether or not an inherited record has been assessed and metadata by a hydroclimate 2K project member. But we will add our initials here to if we've got a new record, just to say that, yep, I've done the metadata. So that's me, GF. This field paleo data created by, that's automatically populated when a lipid is added to the lipid verse. And if it's come in as part of our project, then it will already say hydroclimate 2K. Okay, so there we go. That's it. So that's the one of the steps of the workflow is that this new data set has just been added into our master QC sheet. I had already gathered up the interpretation metadata in the working QC sheet, and now I have copied it into the master QC sheet. So I can exit this filter view now. I don't save it, just click this cross button. Don't save. And there it is. And that's that. That record is done. I mean, I might go and tinker at a few more things. I'm not sure. the last thing I can do here is to put a cross here in our workflow overview to say that all of the metadata has been added to the master QC sheet. Okay, so hope that helps. For anyone who's up to this stage and feeling a bit nervous about diving into the master QC sheet, good luck and happy metadataing.